Mine was from, I got mine off of Amazon. I don't have to pay shipping, so it was cheap. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, Walmart has everything. Oh, it's ready.
Call the meeting to order and welcome everyone here this evening. It's nice to see a crowd out there. Hope folks will continue to come. We've got a pretty active agenda, so we'll get right to business. The first item would be the approval of the agenda by the board.
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor? And motion carries. The second item is I will open up a public hearing for the purpose of the 2016-17 proposed budget, and our manager, Joe Moore, will make the presentation, after which I will ask anyone that wants to make comments. The podium will be open to you. So, Joe?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Tonight I wanted to, as a preview before the public hearing, go over the information that I presented during the budget message, which was done back on May 2nd. I wanted to make a couple of changes, however. One was, in looking back, the May 2nd presentation lacked a little bit of context, meaning what was the relevance behind the goals that we presented to you in the budget. So I wanted to give you some details on that. Second thing is, after the first work session, the mayor asked for some information related to the growth of the current property tax base and the revenue that generated. We provided you the answer to that question through a staff report at the second budget work session. There's been an article in the Eastern Wake News about that, and so I just wanted to have the opportunity to provide a little bit more detail and background on that issue as well. So like last time, we talked about the statutory requirements. I think that's good general background. This is a legally prescribed process by the state of North Carolina. We'll review with you the budget schedule and the process, and this time I'll repeat the budget message, but I'll provide the context as the background, as well as provide that additional information that's related to the staff report that we gave you. So as far as the statutory requirements, it is a general statute. General Statute 159 has some, as I mentioned, prescriptive language. So before April 30th, departments have to submit to the manager budget requests and revenue estimates, both the expenditures and the revenues to date and projected to the end of the fiscal year. Then another prescription is not later than June 1st. The budget officer, in this case the town manager, submits a budget and a budget message to the board, and that was done on May 2nd, so we met that deadline. And then not later than July 1st, the board has to adopt a budget ordinance. But before adopting the budget ordinance, they have to have and hold a public hearing, so that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. As far as the budget schedule and process, as I mentioned, the budget message was delivered on May 2nd. That included the goals and the features of budgeted activities, the changes from the previous year, the reason for those changes, whether they be programs or appropriations. We had a couple of work sessions where we provided the board with details as well as rationale behind the recommended changes. On May 10th, we originally had scheduled May 24th. The board rescheduled that and moved it up a week, but we did have 2 budget work sessions. The budget ordinance public hearing, which is tonight, and then adopting the budget ordinance. As we mentioned to you in the budget message, you can do that tonight. You will have legally met your statutory requirements, but there's no obligation to do so tonight. We had mentioned during the budget message that you had a work session coming up on June 22nd. If you needed more time, you could certainly use that, and we also offered that we're open and available, and it's our duty to provide you any and all amount of time and information you needed, just as long as it's not later than July 1st. So then I went into the goals and the features of the budget message, and goal 1 was the first goal of the budget that we presented to you was to control our investments. Don't let them control us. We had 2 features, which was to manage our streets and manage our fleet. And while that is a worthy goal, it's a generic goal, and so I wanted to give some context later on about why we were recommending as goal number 1 was to control the investments. Goal 2 was to gain return on those investments, make those investments that we have make money, and so the 2 features associated with that goal was to invest in the downtown overlay district, and second feature was to become a walkable community. Once again, I think general, good goals, but they are generic, and so I'll provide you tonight a little bit more context behind why that was offered as a goal for the budget that was presented to you. So goal 1, when we mentioned control our investments, don't let them control us, what we were recognizing is we realized a significant revenue drop. We primarily experienced this revenue drop because our personal property tax revenue dropped, as well as hold harmless revenue, which was a replacement to the inventory tax that we lost in the late 80s and early 90s, dropped away completely. And when revenue dropped, we stopped reinvesting, and we stopped reinvesting primarily and most notably in streets and fleet. And I apologize for the unprofessionalism, but I couldn't resist the rhyming sequence. But we quit reinvesting in our staff. The first 2, the streets and the fleet, those were the primary focus of not only the budget message, but also during our retreat. I've included it here because it goes to the mayor's questions about what we did, what we proposed with the growth in the property tax revenue from 2015 to 2016. So I felt it was worthwhile to get into some details on that. Most notably at your retreat, we talked about deferred investment costs more money, and they cost more money because putting something off for tomorrow, what can be done today, just costs more in inflation. But also, we noted most specifically with streets, the magnitude of the repairs gets to be much more costly as well because the streets degrade even more. We talked about how putting things off to a future year compounds with the expected repairs that were anticipated in those future years. And then that results in a service delivery concern for a couple of reasons. One is if putting something off for so many years where you get into a magnitude of repair problems where we have difficulty delivering or providing the service. An example being in our fleet, when the repairs for a vehicle get to be so much that they are out of service, then we can't provide the service. But service delivery also for a second reason, that when we start to compound all these replacements, the only way to replace those vehicles is to take money away from another service area. So that's what we were getting at when we talked about service delivery. And we mentioned at retreat back in March that we can control costs by reinvesting. And then on the second goal, when we talked about return on investments, making them make money, what we're getting at here is the relevance is our tax base is weighted too heavily in industrial. Our tax base is 70 to 75% industrial and commercial. And this lack of diversification subjects us to extreme and sudden revenue swings and has us overexposed to the whims of regionalization and globalization. So at the end of the day, if there's a big regional company or global company and they need to go where is most profitable for where they need to go, we don't really have any leverage if we're not diversified with our tax base. And we shared at retreat that we can diversify by reinvesting. So that was the context. Goal 1, control our investments, meaning we can control costs by reinvesting. Goal 2, return on investments, meaning we can diversify by reinvesting. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here. I mentioned the personal property tax revenue dropped. I also mentioned about the hold harmless revenue dropped. Let's first focus on personal property tax revenue. You take a look at this graph to your right, you'll see on the bottom axis years 1999 through 2015. And on that left axis, you'll see the numbers 100, 200, 300. That is values in millions of dollars. So $100 million, $200 million, so on and so forth. And when I start to turn on the different components of the property tax revenue, you'll see a blue bar here that is real property tax revenue. So that's the tax on all building and land within the town of Zebulon. This red bar is personal property tax revenue. That's the tax on equipment and vehicles within the town of Zebulon. And this green bar down here, which doesn't come out too clearly, but doesn't change as we progress to the right, that's the tax on public service property. So those pieces of public property like electric lines, gas lines that are taken off the tax roll because they're consuming right-of-way for those public utility purposes. And as we look in year 1999, the real property tax value was about $180 million. In 1999, the personal property tax value was about $120 million. So the combination of the two is a little bit less than $400 million. And as I mentioned with public service property, that's going to stay pretty consistent down here under about $20 million. As we progress to the right, we'll see how these values change. You'll see between 2000 and 2001, there's a big jump in real property. Typically, that's an indication of a revaluation year. So the county comes out every 8 years and takes an assessment of all the buildings and land within Wake County. And they do it for each town. If a town contracts with them, and I think all of them do, they'll come out and they'll determine the value. So when you see a big jump like that, that's typically an indication of a revaluation year. And interestingly enough, Wake County has changed just this year, so the revaluations will occur every 4 years instead of every 8. Down here in personal property tax is evaluated every year. So where the real property is evaluated every 8 years, personal property, once again, equipment and vehicles is evaluated every single year. And so as a result, changes in the economy that result in changes in a company's ownership of equipment or vehicles tends to respond more quickly than it does in real property because it's evaluated every year. And so as we continue to scroll to the right, you'll see that the real property stays fairly flat and in between valuation periods, and that's fairly typical. You'll see the red line fluctuates more greatly because that's an indication of what's going on in the economy typically. And we keep going and we get to about 2008, 2009. The blue line, once again, is an indication, more than likely, of a revaluation year. So it's about 8 years between here and here, and you see the big spike. This red line here is probably an indication of the economy's doing well. Businesses are growing. Orders are coming in, they need more equipment, they need more vehicles, they need to reinvest in order to keep up with orders. And then things start to change a little bit. Around 2009, 2010, you'll see the personal property tax revenues start to decline. The real property is still continuing upward. Once again, that's because it only gets evaluated every 8 years. But the personal property tax, since it gets evaluated every year, responds more quickly. And then as we continue on to the right, you'll see all the way up to about 2013, 2014, there's a big drop there in the personal property tax revenue. So once again, that could be companies are not reinvesting in their equipment, their vehicles, they may be selling off, they may be going bankrupt. The flattening of the real property, that could be several things. There's actually even a dip there, so there may have been some readjustments in the value that the tax assessor came up with. Maybe some bankruptcies, I'm not sure, but it's pretty flat. And so that's what happened between 1999 and 2015 on the real property tax and the personal property tax revenue. And so the takeaways, That the personal property tax reacts suddenly. As I mentioned, it gets evaluated every year, and so it makes adjustments every year, whereas with the real property, it's doesn't change that quickly. But in a community where 70 to 75% of the tax base is commercial and industrial, you can see this reaction is pronounced. There's other communities that were experiencing this same thing, but I doubt that they were experiencing it at the rate that we were. And this loss right here, between 2009 and 2013, resulted in a little over $600,000 in revenue loss. If we were to equate that to what it would have been on a property tax rate increase to recover that loss, it would have been about 7.8 cents. The other big driver in the revenue drop was on what was called the hold harmless revenue. So once again, back in the late 80s, early 90s, the state of North Carolina eliminated inventory tax for a community with a large industrial commercial base. That was a big impact. There was about 100 communities statewide who were impacted by this. And so the state of North Carolina, to help transition those communities or hold them harmless, created hold harmless revenue that they gave to those communities throughout the state. And for us, it was anywhere between $400,000 and $450,000 a year. They had a complicated formula to figure out how to disperse it, but generally it was between those two ranges. And it stayed pretty consistent, and then 2014, they peeled it back halfway, and then by 2015 it was completely gone. And so that loss of $400,000 within 2 years, that was the equivalent, given our tax value at the time, of about 5.5 cents. I think it's worth noting that while there was 100 communities affected, none were in Wake County. Only 4 more across the state suffered this kind of loss or more in value. But when you take a look at the tax value of those properties, meaning of those towns, meaning what would they have had to raise their tax rates to overcome this kind of loss, closest to us, none were equal to us in impact. The closest to us up Lenore, Mr. Baumgartner is familiar with, that would have been about a 4-cent impact to them. And then it just declines from there. Kernersville, which is, I think it's east of Winston-Salem, that was about 2.5 cents. Salisbury was 2.4 cents. In Winston-Salem, which had the biggest monetary impact, but the least impact to their tax rate, was 0.9 cents. I point this out not only because I think it's good trivia, but I think it is easy for us to compare our tax rate with neighboring communities because we've got close proximity, we've got similar history, but nobody in Wake County, no one around us, in fact, very few in the state, experienced what we went through. So when we talk about how to overcome what we experienced, to use the mayor's terms, I think really we were justifiably the poster child of the impact of this loss of hold harmless revenue. So how do we respond? There's really only 2 effective means to respond to reductions in the loss of property tax revenue, or in our case, hold harmless. And there's only 2 effective ways that are in your control. One is to raise property taxes, and the other is to cut services. So either you cut services or you raise the cost of the services that you provide to your community. And we did a little bit of both. As far as raising taxes, and follow along with me because this diagram can get somewhat complicated quickly. When we take a look at the property value in the years between 2009 and 2015, we see the total property value of all of the buildings and the land and equipment and vehicles within the town of Zebulon was a little over $800 million. In 2009, we had a property tax rate, and it corresponds over here on the right, of 51 cents. The next year, the value of all the buildings and lands and equipment and vehicles within the town of Zebulon increased. So it came up just a little shy, under 850 million. We dropped the tax rate to 50 cents. And this yellow triangle right here, what that is that's the tax rate that we could have gone to equal the amount of revenue that was produced in 2009. So we could have dropped the tax rate to, I'll say, 49.5 cents, and we still would have equaled the amount of revenue that we got in 2009 from property values. But the cost of services in 2009 was different in 2010. There was inflation. So when we take into account the inflation, what we would have charged to equal the revenue needed to provide the increased cost of services would have been closer to 52 cents. And as we continue to cycle through, we'll see that this is where the property tax value is starting to drop. This is where not only the real property tax is staying flat, but the personal property tax value is coming down. We kept our tax rate at 50 cents. The revenue neutral rate for 2009 would have been about 51, and the revenue neutral taking into account inflation would have been about 54. And so as we continue to progress to the right all the way to 2015, we see that by 2015, the revenue neutral rate to match the revenue that we received in 2009, that we got pretty close to it. We would have charged 53 cents to equal the revenue that we had in 2009, and right now we're at about 52.5. So we got really close to the revenue neutral. But when you take into account inflation of all these subsequent years, and we did have inflation, by 2015, to match the revenue that would have been needed to match here plus inflation, we would have been closer to 59 cents. So the takeaways are that after 2010, we were not matching the revenue that we were seeing in 2009, and that by 2015, we would have had to raise the tax rate to 59 cents to meet the revenue neutral rate, taking into account inflation. And the loss of this revenue and the hold harmless revenue required deferments and service cuts. And so here's how we cut services. As we mentioned in the government board retreat, when we stopped paving streets, we noted that deferred maintenance is costly. And we shared this diagram with you that if you take a look at this diagram, the left axis is a rating. It's called a pavement condition rating, and just like a score you received in school, 0 is the worst and 100 is the best. And then along the bottom axis is the number of years. And this thick line right here is called a pavement deterioration curve. So as you go to the right, you'll see that the grade of the streets drops off. So what would have been 100 in year 0, by about year 23, 24, it's down there to about a 10. And we shared with the board that in each of these areas, there's an associated cost to repair that pavement. So if we're able to get to a street and do some sort of treatment before year 7, we would be spending 65 cents a square yard. If we let a street go beyond 15 years, we're going to be spending greater than $19.40 a square yard. So that was one of the points that we made at retreat, that deferred maintenance is costly. We also noted that deferred maintenance compounds. And so we talked about the conditions of the streets in 2013. Those streets in excellent condition were around 50%. Those streets in poor condition were probably less than 5%. And if we let things go, then the number of blue streets or excellent streets drops dramatically. The number of poor streets rises dramatically. And using this curve, this pavement deterioration curve as a basis, you can see the cost becomes insurmountable to fix. So what would have been $1 million worth of repairs in 2016 left unattended becomes close to $5 million worth of repairs in the year 2023. So we have offered in this budget a budget goal to get our streets out of the red zone. And what we were talking about at retreat was something that would be along the order of this. We would keep all your streets in excellent condition. We would completely get rid of the poor streets by 2020. The thinking, I think, was noble and accurate at the time, was that if we could get after and keep as many excellent streets as possible, you would have to spend less money to keep your streets up. And logically, that works out. But it means a heavy expense. It would mean 3.5 cents property tax increase the first year, another 2 cents the next year, another cent after that. And then we get into a good area where we're not spending any more than $200,000 a year, which is close to what we'd be getting in our, not close, but reasonably close to getting what we'd get in our Powell bill revenue. So while that was an admirable goal, we thought that this was too front-loaded and too much to pass on to the citizens. So this budget actually reflects a modified approach to that. We're looking to buy time, and here's what our approach is. We want to dip into the general fund balance, which is your savings account, to catch up on some streets. And so that will look like spending that money in the coming year, 2017. So most notably, that would go to Wakefield Street, which rates as your worst pavement condition rated street in the town. And then we would dedicate the 2-cent property tax increase to street repaving. So this would take what is our Powell bill, which is about $125,000. That's gas tax money. Right now, that's going to operational expenses like staffing. If we increase the property tax 2 cents, we can free up that gas tax to go to putting asphalt down on streets. And so what this does, while this doesn't eliminate all the red streets, it does buy us time. And our goal in this budget is, since Wake County is going to reevaluate property every 4 years, is that we want to be here in 2020. We haven't eliminated all the poor streets, but at least we feel as though we're in a good position and we've made some progress. So that was feature one. The other area where we cut services was in fleet, similar to what we said to the board at retreat regarding streets, that deferred replacement equals costly repairs. So you can see an excellent condition vehicle, which is anywhere between 3 years and $36,000, that the maintenance is routine, the annual cost is about $1,000. Come down here to a fair condition vehicle, which is 5+ years or $50,000 to $70,000. The maintenance gets a little bit more complicated and complex, and we start getting closer to $9,000 in annual costs. Much like the streets, we talked about deferred replacements compound. So as an example, while this is just one segment of our fleet system, the police chief was given the presentation at the retreat, and he talked about how in 2008 we had 6 vehicles in excellent condition and 2 vehicles in fair condition. By the time we get to 2015, the number of excellent vehicles has dropped, the number of fair vehicles has risen, and that there are some vehicles that have even come off of the fair category and are in the poor category. One of the concerns that we shared at retreat, and we've shared in our weekly updates, is that these repairs not only are costly, but some of them we're starting to experience some out-of-service repairs where we have to take vehicles out of service. Notable example, we had the ladder truck serve as a backup to one of our engines while that engine was out for 2, I think maybe 3 weeks, but definitely 2 weeks. The other concern that we shared is that as these number of vehicles out here in the fair category compound, the only way to replace them is through loans. And loans are not necessarily a bad thing. When we get into vehicles that are very expensive, like ladder trucks that cost $1.5 million, fire engine trucks that cost $750,000, we have to finance those. There's no way that we would want to tie up that kind of cash for those kinds of replacements. So that's not the loans that we're talking about. What we're concerned with is these vehicles, if we're buying vehicles with loans that have a service life of 5 vehicles and then, or 5 years, and we have a succession of replacements where we're going to start to have some overlapping loans out there. And so loans for short-term common pieces of equipment begin to overlap. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to avoid, which led to our recommendation for the budget that's before you. One is to get out of the red zone and as a result spend less money on maintenance, maintain our service reliability, even out the spending, and buy time to grow purchase power. And what that means is this: in the budget that you've got before you, I'd like to say that we've solved all the world's problems, but we haven't. We're trying to buy you enough time so that as your tax base grows, we'll get more money for the tax rate of 2 cents. So right now, 2 cents will bring in $160,000 to the town of Zebulon. We're hoping that that tax value will grow as more property comes on and we can put more money into our fleet management as well as our street resurfacing program. But we're not there right now. What this budget does is it gets you at least 3 years down the road. We're hoping that as that tax base grows, we get more revenue. Maybe we can make it a 4th year to when Wake County does another revaluation. The other thing we want to buy time on is there are some big ticket items out there that need replacement by 2019, 2020 at the latest, and both of those are the ladder truck and the engine truck. We're going to have to figure out a way how we can structure loans to get those replacements. So we're looking to buy time to figure out how we finance those big equipment replacements as well. And so how we propose to fund this in the budget before you is clean up the lot. We've got some fixed assets that we're just holding on to, and we need to get rid of those. We're looking once again to use some of the savings from the general fund balance to not only help catch us up, but we've got an opportunity where we can leverage some grants. Specifically, we've got a vehicle with our fire department that while the fire department can't use it, our planning department can, because they have less requirements on their use of vehicles. That vehicle, that fire vehicle, was purchased in conjunction with Wake County. And so we're using these, some of this general fund balance to buy Wake County out so we can get that vehicle and so we can give it to the planning department. And then once again, dedicating 2 cents every year to the property tax increase to the annual fleet management program. Now, getting to this notion of cutting services in staff, we stopped investing in our personnel. This became what I'm calling the era of doing more with less. And the reason I put these words in quotes is as I was going through reviews, this was a common phrase that I would come across, which was do more with less. It wasn't really a description about why there was less. It wasn't a description of how or when we were going to get to a point where there was going to be less. It was just this refrain. And so it explained a lot when I was coming into this organization why it just seemed like there was a lot of stress in the organization. So I started looking at how we started, what we did on the employment side as we dealt with these shortfalls in revenue. And so here's a graph of what we did with full-time employment numbers between 2010 and 2015. We kept things flat between 2010 and 2011, but in 2011 we increased 2 positions, and these 2 positions were financed through a cut in a part-time position as well as the passage of stormwater fees. And I'll get into description later about what we're proposing to use those stormwater fees in the future. Then there was an increase in 3 positions for firefighters, which was a phenomenal idea. What this did is it allowed a 4th person to be on each shift, which allowed a 2 in, 2 out scenario, which is just a basic safety requirement where you have 2 firefighters in the house, you have two people on the outside, either go in to rescue them or go in to expel them. So this was phenomenal. It was financed through a grant, but as with all grants, there comes a time where the grant, as is expected, is only a seed money and it goes away. And then after 2013, we started cutting positions. So as I mentioned, in 2012, we added 2 stormwater positions through fees. 2013, we added 3 firefighters through a grant. In 2014, we cut 2 public works employees and we cut 2 police officers. Now, we didn't police any less, or we didn't cut any parks out of our system. We just did more with less. Specifically on the police department, what we did is we became a reactive department. Whereas when we had those 2 officers there, we could have proactive policing. We could take a look at trends. We could set up speed studies. In this case, with the 2 police cut, we not only just lost that proactive ability and just reacted to situations as they occurred, but also became a very lean department. And so when people were out for vacation or sickness or even military leave, it became real tough to fully staff shifts. And then in 2015, we added a position in Public Works, but we did so at the cost of cutting 2 part-time positions. I don't know that any of this ever came before you. This is information that I saw in the background, but it looked like there was discussion that there was needs for Human Resources Director as well as help in the Planning Department. Once again, I don't know that that even came before you. It looks like it just forewent and went a filter before it got to you, but it looks like there were some needs expressed on both of these positions in the past, and they were not brought forward. And then one of the last things we did is we reduced the merit below the cost of inflation. So our merit system, if someone even got the full merit for a few years, they would be making less than what the cost of inflation was. So this is another area where we cut. And when the mayor talks about that the property tax base grew, he's absolutely correct. And as a result, we gained about $336,000 in property tax revenue. We also gained about $50,000 in sales tax revenue. And you'll see in the next slide that what I proposed is funneling that money back into staff. And this is what's proposed. Before we get in, I'll just take a detour. This is our public works staff and our firefighters working together on a tractor trailer that overturned out on the junction of 64 and 264. Our public works crew is there cleaning up. It was a tractor trailer carrying steel I-beams, and this is one of our staff cleaning up the nuts and bolts. And interestingly enough, our nuts and bolts line item in the budget is well ahead of schedule, so I don't know if it's just, I'm sure it's a coincidence. This is, we participated in Touch a Truck Day, so we went out to Zebulon Library, brought out fire trucks, brought out public works trucks. Chief Perry, missing no opportunity, already has someone suited up there, so he's starting the recruiting early. This was our recycling day. We took 2.5 tons of shredded paper out of people's houses, over 20 gallons of motor oil, and I think 12, maybe 14 pallets of electronics. And this is a picture from Superheroes Day, which is something that our Parks and Rec department oversees, but Chief Perry, absolutely having no boundaries whatsoever, sees it as another opportunity to recruit someone, so he's got someone out there working the fire hose. But probably the thing that's probably nearest and dearest and is a warm and worthy regard is every year the hospitals in the area, they have what's called the Code Celebrate ceremony. And what that is survivors of code-related incidents, heart attack as an example, they get to tell their their life experience, and they get to honor those who participated in helping them survive. Zebulon was well honored this year. You can see several of the police officers and the firefighters who were honored for participating in a code resuscitation. And so going back to how we did more with less and how we've proposed in this budget to roll that growth in property tax revenue and that growth in sales tax revenue back into the staff, where we had lost 2 stormwater positions through fees. Really, we'd like the fees to go to projects. I think there's an expectation of citizens when they see a fee on their bill that they get in exchange for services. So if they see a sanitation bill or a recycling fee, they see in exchange for service. It's a lot of questions about what am I getting with my stormwater fees. So rather than these fees go to pay for personnel, we want these fees to go to projects around town. So that was where part of the money went to, is to free up those fees to go to projects, and that money goes to stormwater positions. The 2 public works positions that were cut in 2014, that's where the equipment operator and the asset manager that are noted in your budget, that's where that is coming from. 2014, 2 police cut, so I went to every department director and I gave them, what do you have to have? And for the police chief, it was those vehicles. While I'm sure he would say he wants to have a more proactive department, the more pressing need is the vehicles, and simply adding money for part-time hours to beef up the auxiliary, or to have overtime money for those officers who can work stretch shifts or extra shifts to account for people who are out on vacation, sick, or military leave. That's going to be enough to cover those margins. We forewent human resources director and a planning position, and so this is where the part-time administrative help is. Right now your clerk is doing what last count, I think it's probably 7 positions. The one thing that I'm most worried about is we're not overseeing a consistent human resources program. So I'm hoping the part-time administration help can come in and just spell her a little bit so that the 2 of us can develop a strategy on what we need to do for human resources so that we have a consistent program for hiring, recruiting, training, and even if it comes to disciplining employees. The planning position, looking to get another person in for what is a small department of 3 people who spend a lot of time in the field, just as a way to get some coverage at the window, but also to take care of all the code enforcement activity that we've got going on. Similar to what we see with the police department, this is a reactive department. With code enforcement, if you're not proactive, not only do situations get pretty far down the road and become more cumbersome to resolve as a result because they got to be so big, whether it be a weedy lot or an abandoned vehicle, but also the community just has a growing expectation that you're responding quicker than you are, and so things aren't reacted as quickly. And then as far as the reduced merit below the CPI, this budget includes merit at 3%. So that was controlling our investments. This is a good break. Let me just check in to see if there's any questions before I talk about gaining a return on investments. All right. So way forward, diverse by investing in downtown. We mentioned at the governing board retreat that change presents opportunities. So we shared some examples of this town in Virginia where, in this case, a movie theater had fallen in on itself, and the town moved forward, put some leadership, and made something that was blight into something positive. So they took the back screen of the building that was still here and used it as a performance space. And through that, they started realizing that the community started to engage, not only engage as far as coming to events like this, but they started wanting to participate. And so that community saw some things where the community was coming forward and willing to put forth and create murals, as an example in this case. So a feature that we put in your downtown, or in your budget, is to invest in downtown. The goal is that we're looking to gain more revenue out of the $65 million of property value that you've got in downtown and in the surrounding neighborhoods. Not only invest so that the property value increases, but most notably in the downtown area so we can see increased sales tax from retail opportunities. And we look to accomplish that by strategically seizing opportunities to partner. So what does that mean, and what's an example? So let's take this building as an example. Let's say a brewer or maybe a distiller comes and wants to look at this building. It's a cool looking building, got a lot of potential. They'll typically call the realtor. The realtor will get them access. They'll start to walk in, and they'll start to realize that the building is probably not up to fire code or current building code, which probably won't necessarily be a surprise. That's pretty typical in downtown areas. But for a specific use like a distillery or a brewery, you start to get into some operational concerns about, is the ceiling high enough? Do the floor joists support the heavy loads that these types of businesses require with their vats of a lot of weight? What is the delivery like in and out of the building? And after a while, start to see that the person who wants to rent or buy this building is going to have to put a lot of money into not only bringing the building up to code, but also bringing the building up to the needs of their specific business. So what some communities have started to do is to establish grant programs. So one example of that is a facade grant. Wendell has one where the town will kick in a match of a certain percent or a certain amount just to spruce up the outside of the building. If someone is coming in and they're having to invest a lot of money to improve the interior just to get up and operational, might not necessarily focus first on the outside. So this is a way to not only help the new tenant out, but also to give a look of vibrancy to downtown. And so we've got recommended in this budget money for facade grants. Down the road, we look if this facade grant program is successful to augment that and have some internal improvements. Those internal improvements could be getting up to building code, ADA code, fire code, so on and so forth. The other thing we're looking for in this budget is to engage the community, what we're calling base hits. So we gave an example of something very simple where someone in the community up in Virginia, they took advantage of this fire hydrant with a bell, and they painted this caricature on the side. This, while it doesn't appear significant, is significant. It's letting the community know that there's people interested in downtown. And if we can have some sort of program that helps them from a regulatory standpoint, meaning give them permission, or even from a financial standpoint to help match them on a certain amount, it can send the message that the community cares and is active and engaged in downtown. And then finally, to sustain the program, you really need, it can't be a top-down or a town-only program. It's got to have some organic ownership, meaning it's got to have the building owners, it's got to have the business owners, it even has to have community members who care about their downtown involved. And one successful program is the Main Street program. So looking to get a group of people together, whether they be business owners, whether they be property owners, whether they be just interested citizens, to develop and follow the Main Street program. So we've got some money in this budget to at least seed that program and get it started. So specifically, we're looking to use the general fund balance for a market study. So a market study is going to help us determine what are going to be the good bets. While someone might come and look at this building, what kind of business is really going to be marketable? While someone might come here to this building and might want to open up a sandwich shop, Market study is going to help us determine whether a sandwich shop is going to be verifiable or not. It's going to take a look at the saturation. It's going to look at the traffic counts. It's going to let us know if something like a brewery or a distillery could go there. So market study is going to help us to determine who to place the bets on, so to speak. Market study is also going to engage these people down here. They are going to be a part of helping to determine what they want to see become of their downtown. So the market study engages them as well. It can serve as a good basis for what would be your future Main Street program, but the market study engages as well as telling us what our good bets are. Facade grants, I mentioned, this would be the first program. If it's successful, we'd like to look at internal improvement loans, but facade grants we think is a good first step. Regulatory relief as part of your UDO process. You will be considering ways that development downtown could occur without the types of expectations and restrictions you would see in more of a green side area. That's good sense, but it's also realistic when you take a look at the amount of space available. You're not going to be able to realistically provide the buffers and the offsets that you would in a green space. So we're looking to propose regulatory relief for the downtown area as part of your UDO process. We propose in the budget match grants. So for situations like this, if an interested group of citizens comes forward and they want to do some sort of beautification, that there is some sort of match grants out there to at least show some sort of partnership. And then we've also included in this budget seed money for a Main Street program. To get a Main Street program started, you need articles of incorporation, you need tax exempt status. And so this is some money that can at least help offset some of those costs if there's a party that comes forward and shows some interest. Next way forward, we talked about diversifying is through investing in residential development. So we went on a tour of Greenway Systems in Wake Forest and in Raleigh. It was a good day. We walked away understanding that greenways can increase development value and competitiveness. And by that I mean this development with a greenway in it and attached to other greenways might make the difference on someone moving here versus moving to another development that it's just all about cost. This has a little bit more of a community feel, and so the developer might have an advantage and might, as a result, be able to charge more for this development. So if we can get developers to charge more for some of their development, then we get more property tax revenue as a result of it. We also saw on the tour that it could increase home value. So somebody who makes an investment by buying a house in this development, they can, and they do, make this physical connection from their house to the greenway, just so they can note that as physically connecting to the greenway to increase their home values. And then we also saw on our tour that by having that greenway system within a development and connected to other amenities, whether it be parks or centers, or even in this case, like a pavilion, that can create a sense of community. And when you have community, you create connectivity, meaning that people are connected to one another, so they start to pull together and do things that they self-initiate things. So as an example, this is a little kiosk that they built. They put books in there, and it's a loan program. If you want to come by and grab a book, you can grab a book. And we saw out there opportunities for moms and dads to read to their children. And so once again, this might be something that increases that developer's competitiveness or increases the town's competitiveness for someone to move into a subdivision like this. And as a result of that competitiveness, maybe they're willing to pay more. The result being that we get increased property revenue and we get diversified property revenue because we have more residential development coming on. As far as what we talked about at retreat, we realized that this was very expensive. This looks very nice right here. This looks very nice. All of this looks very nice. we learned that, my words, but Rome wasn't built in a day. So we presented at retreat that there's a two-tiered approach we can take to building the Greenway system. One is through short-term goals, and one is through long-term goals. So in this budget, what we presented to you is a dual-track approach. The first is to fill in these missing gaps. So you've got a gap between two assets, in this case between a school and the Boys and Girls Club. In this case, between downtown and the community center and neighborhood down here. And while we're working on filling in the gaps in those first years, we can be working to do the longer term stuff, like connecting the greenway between what is Tarrant Meadows and Weaver's Pond. We can use that first year to assemble grants, to get guarantees from developers, to put in a system here. And so that's what we're proposing, is that first year we fill in the gaps, and in that first year we buy time to complete the Greenway segment to boost the value of these two neighborhoods. Resources being a 0.5-cent property tax increase dedicated to an annual sidewalk program, and leverage general fund balance against any grants or any match that we can get from a developer in this area. And then seize on those development opportunities. As development comes in and they meet the obligations of the Greenway Master Plan, they dedicate easements, they may actually build greenways, add on to those dedications by either building something in the greenways or add on to those existing, or add on to those new greenways that they were required to build. So in summary, property tax rate increase of 5 cents, with 2 cents dedicated to annual street resurfacing project, 2 cents dedicated to annual fleet management program, 0.5 cent dedicated to annual sidewalk and greenway program, 0.5 cent dedicated to annual property management fund, which is, we've got several buildings. This one is even getting close to 10 years, but we've got buildings like our fire station where we need to replace. That's going to be a $4 million replacement when we get to it. Start putting away that money to take care of the annual maintenance things like HVAC, but also start putting money away to those wholesale replacements like the fire station. General fund balance, use close to $950,000 with a big focus on streets and thoroughfare. Information technology, so very much like our infrastructure, whether it be streets, we have some needs on both from a website standpoint as well as upgrading our financial software. $125,000 to community and economic development, which is for the downtown area and the UDO. $109,000 to fleet management, $108,000 to stormwater, and $92,000 for sidewalks and greenways. And this is what the mayor was referring to, that there was a growth between 2015 and 2016 in both the value of the property revenue and the value of the sales tax revenue. In all total, it's about $391,000. That's close to, that value right there is close to 5 cents. The growth in the property tax revenue was about 336, and the sales was a little over 50. So the property, that is about 4 cents. And so when the mayor was talking about 4 cents, this is what he's referring to. And what we have proposed is to roll that growth in property and sales tax growth into the 3% merit, free up the stormwater fee, so the stormwater fee isn't going to personnel, but it's going to projects. Go to the positions that we talked about, and go to a dedicated economic development arm, specifically a contractual relationship with the Chamber of Commerce to help us promote and seize upon economic development opportunities, not only for the existing businesses that we've got within the town to help them grow and promote them, but also to be a good facilitator, good liaison for those new businesses. As an example, whether it be the brewer or the distiller or the baker or whomever, just someone where they can make contact with the town. And so that's where part of that money is coming from. Let me pause here because, Mayor, I know this was a particular point that you wanted to make. Is my reference to the property and sales growth, is that reflecting what you were talking about?
Yeah, it's basically, you add that 4 cents to the 5 cents, and that's the way you look at the property tax increase, and you covered that well.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, 3 more slides. So we talked about in the pre-budget meeting back in April, we talked about what's the cause and effect of raising taxes or using general fund balance. So here's general rules of thumb. For every cent we're gonna, in town of Zebulon, we'll raise about $80,000. Another rule of thumb, that for every cent, what does it cost the owner of a $100,000 value building and property? Quick rule of thumb is you take off the first four zeros to the right. So a 1 cent property tax increase on a $100,000 property is going to be $10 a year. $300,000 is going to be $30 a year. A $5 million value building property, and because that will probably be a business, includes personal property tax like fleet and equipment, would be about $500 a year. Look more specifically at the town of Zebulon. The average value home in the town is $139,000. So a 1 cent tax increase would be $13.91 or 4 cents a day. When we take a look at the top 10 taxpayers within the town, the average of those top 10 is about 31 million. So they would be paying a little over $3,100 a year or $850 a day. If you passed a 5 cent tax increase, average resident is going to be paying about $70 a year. The average of your top 10 taxpayers is going to be paying about $15,000 a year. A couple of things to note. On the residential side, between 2015 and 2016, the value of the median or the mean house value in the town of Zebulon dropped. So that means that for these mean value homes, raising the tax rate to 53, from 52.5 to 53.9 will not increase their property tax bill. Now, this is just on the average, so I just want to point that out. But I'm really trying to make note that there was some devaluation that occurred on the residential side within the town. All right, last slide, so I'm going to hit you with the hardest stuff first. There's been concern about how much general fund balance we're using, so I'll try to walk you through this, and I'll do it piecemeal. If you take a look at these blue bars, they are the proposed budgets for FY 2016 and FY 2017. And why they're listed here as projected, because we don't know the revenue for this fiscal year until the accountants close the books. So we're assuming that after all the budget adjustments are done, that the budget for this year is going to be a little over $8 million. When we go to FY 2017, if you pass the budget ordinance that's before you, that's going to increase above $10 million. It's probably close to 11. This is probably closer to 9. And so if this year pans out like we think, this budget is going to be a little over 8. If the budget ordinance is passed and we fast forward to this time next year and the auditors close out the books, we think that difference is going to be closer to 11 million. The difference being is that this increase from here up to here is the 5 cent property tax increase. It's the property tax and sales tax growth. It's the use of general fund balance. Now this red bar, this is the amount of fund balance that you have available, so close to $7 million. If you pass the budget ordinance, this is going to reduce by close to $1 million, and so that's going to be the difference there. So your fund balance, if you pass this budget ordinance, is going to go below $6 million. One of the things that's been shared with us as a concern is how well are we guarded against economic downturns? How well are we protected in getting a favorable bond rating if we go out and get a bond like we did for this building by reducing our general fund balance? So we've compiled some scenarios for you. And this first scenario has to do with economic downturn. So this black column, this blue column, and this red column. What the black column refers to is if we experience another Great Recession. Sure sign that you're talking too long when you can't speak. The blue bar is a reflection of if you had a Great Recession and your second largest employer and second largest taxpayer went defunct for whatever reason. And then this red bar is the combination of another Great Recession, that taxpayer going under, and also your number one taxpayer and your number one employer. So the total for both of these scenarios is about you would be without about $2 million. So even in this scenario right here, close to $6 million, you've got maybe a little less than 3 times what you would need to survive that economic scenario. The other concern that was shared with us is keeping enough fund balance on hand so you can get a favorable bond rating. And when we look at the rating agencies like Standard & Poor's, and we look at Moody's in particular, they use your fund balance as 10% of the total score that they use in giving you a favorable bond rating. And to get the most of that 10%, you would have to have 30% on hand. And so that's what this blue bar represents. And so you can see that the general fund balance is above the 30% that Moody's would be looking to you to make sure that you would get the most favorable bond rating as it relates to how much fund balance you've got on hand. They look at other things as well, but when it comes to fund balance, the literature that they provide says they look at fund balance as 10% of the score. And then the last thing that we looked at is you have adopted a policy, and the policy says that you will not dip below 50%. So we did an analysis on that. And if this year pans out the way that we think the auditors will tell you that it'll pan out, that when they give you a report in November of this year, that they'll tell you that the fund balance is 61%. We think if you adopt this budget and you use this amount of fund balance, once again, granted we're projecting out, but that would reduce it down to 52%. So when we talk about the amount of fund balance being used, looking at economic downturns, looking at Moody's fund balance criteria, and looking at your policy, the fund balance meets all 3 of those criteria that you have expressed and actually put into policy. And that's it. I'll take any questions or comments before you open up the public hearing.
I think we're good. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I will open the floor for comments that you may have on the budget. I would say that this is the budget that's been presented to us by staff. We have not really massaged it or worked on it yet, so we want to hear what you have to say, and it's not necessarily the final document, so I just want you to understand that. The board has not yet decided on a final document. So anyway, having said that, I would open up the floor for anyone that wishes to comment on the budget. I would ask that you come to the podium and give us your name and address. And the podium is yours. Anybody that wishes to speak? Don?
My name is Donald Horton. I reside at 618 Stratford Drive, Zebulon, North Carolina. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight regarding the proposed 2016-2017 budget, and for your wisdom exhibited by the employment of Joe Moore as your town manager. After a thorough review of the proposed budget on the computer, I felt compelled to appear before you in a public meeting to support this budget so thoughtfully prepared and presented by Town Manager Moore and his staff. The proposed budget is much more than required by law. It includes a detailed review of the current status of financial issues faced by the town, and then provides a well-thought-out and documented financial plan for the future. If approved and implemented as presented, it will move the town forward to resolve some overdue issues involving infrastructure, equipment, and vehicle needs that were created in part by negative actions of the North Carolina General Assembly. This proposed budget addresses these issues and sets forth a solid financial path for the future. I fully understand that this proposed budget will increase the actual amount of taxes paid by Zebulon taxpayers whose property values were increased by the reevaluation. However, in my humble opinion, I believe that it will cost taxpayers even more in the future if you do not adopt this sound fiscal plan so ably developed and presented for your consideration. As you are well aware, positive growth is at our doorstep. As a result, the town of Zebulon is a fork in the road. If we take the fork that takes advantage of the combined talents of Manager Moore and his staff, and partner and utilize the renewed energy of the Zebulon Chamber of Commerce under the leadership of Director Denise Nowell, the future of Zebulon looks bright indeed. If we decide to take the fork that does not move us forward in a positive way and kick the can further down the road, things will not be so bright. I know that as elected officials, voting for a budget that will cause some people to pay more taxes is not easy. If it is tough for you, just imagine how difficult it must be for a manager to submit such a budget in his first year on the job. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and commitment to the future of the town of Zebulon to take this action. He is to be commended. In summary, if I was sitting in your seat, I would vote for the budget as presented. I strongly request that you do the same. Thank you again for allowing me to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on the budget? Come on, we got this big crowd and nobody. Okay, last call. All right, I'll close the public hearing, and this board will decide how to move forward later in the meeting. The next item is a public comment period. Did we have anyone sign up? We did not. The next item is a consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor? And motion carries. Presentations, we had the Zebulon Youth Council. They were here. Saw that they had to leave. I guess, Joe, you should have drank the water sooner. But anyway, Greg will talk to us a little bit about the Zebulon Youth Council, which is a really fine asset of this community.
Yeah, the Zebulon Youth Council was formed in July of 2013, and they've been working really hard for several years now. You've seen no texting signs through town. They came to the town board and wanted to do that. Those are the result of some of their work. They put up about 8 no texting signs. When you leave here tonight, you'll see it. They've done a lot of wonderful things. What they do provide is the civic engagement. It develops our leadership skills, and it serves the community through volunteer service projects and activities. Some of the activities that they've done, they've worked in the Farm Fresh Market. They volunteer for that. The Halloween Trunk or Treat, notes for troops, to where they wrote notes and sent those over to some of the troops that are across seas. They've done the Zebulon Rehab 2 program, where they conduct bingo games, and they do notes from Santa, and they have a parents' night out to where parents can bring their kids over. We babysit them through the youth council, and they get a date and go out and have dinner together. So they've done a lot of good work. I hate that they had to leave. They'd have loved to gotten out here, but anyway, they've done really good work. They are funded through the John Rex Endowment Healthy Communities Grant, and we're very thankful for that group for funding that. Any questions on the?
No, I would just say that I appreciate the fact that they have remained active and grown, and Commissioner York and myself had the opportunity to spend time with them and carry them through the building prior to the meeting and answer any of their questions. And I think they had their first graduating class this year as well, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. We had Miss Jasmine Porter. It was her idea. She came to the mayor back in 2013, wanted to start this group, and she is graduating and going to UNC Greensboro. That's where she was this evening, I believe.
Well, anyway, I will if I see them, but certainly you will convey our appreciation for their efforts, and we're proud to have them as part of the community.
Very good.
Any comments from anyone else? Thank you, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
May Day celebration and recap.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and just take off into that.
All right.
This was a event that we did back on May 14th, I think was the date, on a Saturday. And I think most of you were here. And the wonderful thing about this event was that it was a collaboration with the town, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Carolina Mudcats. And so what I would like to do is bring up the wonderful people that helped put that together and have them speak to you about how that particular day went. Lisa's going to come up also, I think, and we'll show a video. Let's show the video first.
Greg, I've got it.
You got it?
Yep.
You going to do it?
Yep. I can do it from here.
Check out this video that was done.
Hey, it's Mike Wheelis of the Q Morning Crew on 94.7. Zebulon getting geared up for May Day this Saturday right here. And I got to tell you, a big 5K race. You don't want to miss out on that. Also, the Zebulon Farm Fresh Market. Lots of great stuff. And capping it off with the Carolina Mudcats game. Woo! May Day right here Saturday in Zebulon.
Hi, I'm Denise with the Zebulon Chamber of Commerce. Come out this Saturday for May Day in Zebulon. Don't miss the 5K road race. It starts at 9 a.m. right here behind Municipal Hall.
My name is Maureen Brown. I'm the manager of the Zebulon Farm Fresh Market. Come out this Saturday and buy some fresh local produce at the Zebulon Farm Fresh Market and enjoy some live music as you shop and get something yummy to eat from Brown Bagel Food Truck.
Hi, I'm Duke Sanders from the Carolina Mudcats baseball team, and I'm here to tell you that the culmination of May Day in Zebulon will be this Saturday night with a Carolina Mudcats baseball game. Now, what we're going to ask you to do to get a $7 ticket instead of a $10 box seat ticket is we're going to ask you to take a selfie of yourself with some posters or maybe some signs that show the May Day in Zebulon logo. You can get that from probably the town of Zebulon. You can get it from the Chamber of Commerce. You can even get it from me. So email me at the Mudcats and I'll send you a copy of the logo. So snap that picture, post it on your favorite social media site, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook or whatever. And bring that post then to the ballpark, show it to the ticket office, and we'll give you a $10 box seat for only $7. One post equals one ticket. So you want to make several posts if you want to get several tickets. So once again, the culmination of the entire May Day in Zebulon is with the Carolina Mudcats this Saturday night.
Really good job on that. And if you were here, you know what happened after that. We had a great day. It was beautiful weather, and with the 5K went off really well. The farmers market was awesome. I can't remember if the Mudcats won or not. Mudcats won that night, so everything was great. So I'm going to bring up the three people that were mostly responsible for this event. We traded in Duke for Becca Holtgreave. That was a great trade. Come on up, Becca. Maureen Brown is here from the Farmer Fresh Market, and Miss Denise Nowell is here from the Chamber, and they'd like to share with you a little bit about what went on that day and how fun we had planning it.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, our members, and the Board of Directors, we do want to thank you guys. The Chamber has participated with you guys using your facility for several years in a row for the 5K race. So in preparing for the race, our planning team realized that there were several other community events going on the same day. So we immediately saw this as an opportunity to create something bigger that could highlight all of Zebulon and promote recognition for all the organizations hoping to increase participation in their events. So our focus was just a short amount of time to get energy around a way to market each of the events. We pulled a group together that met to put some ideas together and figure out how could we brand this day. By the end of the meeting, the group had created May Day in Zebulon, and everyone left with a list of things that they could each do to create as much buzz as possible for the day. And part of what you saw in the video came out of that focus group meeting. The result was by identifying and making good use of available resources and talent, we were able to jointly promote the town's Farm Fresh Market, the 10th annual Greater Zebulon 5K, and an afternoon game for the Carolina Mudcats. The video I just mentioned, East Wake TV came together and helped us put that together, and by the end of it, Gary had emailed us and let us know that the Facebook post that had the link to the video on his page alone reached 3,000 viewers. And that doesn't include all of our organizations that also posted it on their Facebook pages. So that was great. So the Mudcats, the Chamber, and the market all felt the energy and excitement that came from that. And where we go from here, we feel like there's so much potential for May Day in Zebulon as we look ahead to 2017. By branding it the way we did, we're not limited. We can actually include even more groups or organizations. We can begin promotion earlier, and we can create more synergy around a day that highlights not just who we are and what we have to offer, but also all the great things that make up the town of Zebulon. So thank you for your support for this opportunity.
Thank you, Denise.
I guess I'm speaking next. Good evening, everybody. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the farmers market and May Day in Zebulon. As you know, the Zebulon Farm Fresh Market is funded by a grant from the John Rex Endowment, and we are in the second year of funding, and we are at the start of the second season of the market. May has been a very successful month for the farmers market, and especially opening day and May Day were very successful. Our overall rating from our vendors for May Day was actually very good. We tried to come up with a metric, and one of the ways that we came up with is having the farmers rate the day, basically, and so for May Day, they rated us very good. Actually, one of the vendors had the best day they'd ever had at any market ever, anywhere. So I think that was really telling of how well the day went. I'd really like in the future to have a lot of things that we combined, especially with the Chamber of Commerce, because kind of in Zebulon, if one thing's happening, it might get that attention and might cause something like the market not to be as active. So if we have an event with the Chamber, we're kind of combining our forces and getting everybody at one place at one time. I just want to speak briefly about two of the programs that we started at the market this year. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with our Farmers Food Share. That is a 501c that started in the Carborough Market. With this, we had identified the Zebulon United Methodist Church as having a really good food pantry. So they have manned a booth at the market, and they are collecting donations for Farmers Food Share, and the food is donated directly to their food pantry, so it goes to directly into the community. It's a really great program. They have really exceeded all expectations. That is very telling about how giving our community is. Another program that we're starting June the 18th is the summer feeding program. So any child in our area can come to the market and receive a free meal through the summer, just on Saturdays, while school is out. It's a really great program, and we're really proud at our market to have these two great programs happening that benefit our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Like I said, I'm Becca with the Carolina Mudcats, and we just started our 26th season here in Zebulon. And this was my first season here, but as well, it was one of the first seasons that we have worked with the Chamber and really creating an event that was all-inclusive in the town, whether it was with the farmers market. We've done a couple of raffles at our games on Fridays before the farmers market, and it's a huge hit. It's something that every Friday game our season ticket holders come up and want to be a part of and want to win that raffle item of farm fresh produce. So I think this year really laid the groundwork. Like Denise said, we want to start earlier next year and get more promotion out there and make it a bigger, more community involvement event. But I think this year laid great groundwork for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks to all of you. May Day was really a fun day. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. Okay, the next item is old business, is rezoning 2016-03 Cypress Creek renewals. Before we have a staff report, I just want to be sure that everybody understands that all of the media and everything's been focused on solar farms. And this is not a special use permit hearing. It's not specifically on solar farms. It is a legislative zoning hearing, which asks, is R13 appropriate in that location, considering adjacent properties. So there is, we do on occasion have special use or quasi-judicial hearings that speak specifically to a single occupancy, but this does not. And I just want to be sure that everybody understands that this is a legislative hearing, not a special use permit. So having said that, I'll ask staff for their report, and she'll probably repeat what I just said, but I want to be sure that we're clear. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. I'm going to switch PowerPoints real quick so we can call up the case file. Case before you tonight is rezoning case 2016-03. It is a request by Cypress Creek Renewables to rezone approximately 5.5 acres located at 0 South Arundel Avenue, which is just a little bit south of the community center on the opposite side of the street. We'll show you a map here in a minute. So the property owner right now is the heirs of Robert E. Horton, and the PIN number is listed, the acreage, the current use is vacant. The proposed use is R13, the existing zoning is R10. And this is the map I was referring to. The Zebulon Community Center is just a little bit up here, and the park is a little bit up this way. And then there's just a little bit of road frontage here. And then this is the parcel in question. And I'll give you a zoning map here. So the red hatched is the parcel. These are the surrounding property owners that were notified of the public hearing. We've notified property owners within 150-foot radius of the property. So we do a buffer through GIS and then send out property notices based on the tax card information from IMAPs in Wake County. So you have the R10 area here, you have R20 over here, you have R13 here. And the difference between R10, R20, and R13 is the basic density between the zoning densities. So R10 is a little more condensed, R13 is a little bit more rural, and R20 is a more rural, more sparse people per land density. The RMF is the multifamily. There's apartment complexes over in this area. It's the one of the few residential multifamily communities that we have in the area. So north of the property we have Shiloh Temple. It's a vacant property, but the church does own it. To the east we have the Craigs. To the south we have more property owned by the Horton heirs. And then the Zebulon Maples Associates, which owns and runs the apartments. So the apartments here, Shiloh Temple is here, the Craigs here, and then these properties are owned by the Horton heirs. It's the same owners as this parcel in question. This is the land use map showing the land use plan for the town that we adopted through the comprehensive plan. HR stands for high residential density. MD is medium density for residential. PSP is for the parks and open space. TC is town core. TN is traditional neighborhood. So you can see some of the areas around here, the traditional neighborhood, the high density residential, and the medium density residential here. So high density residential, the code HR, there's a description here and then characteristics. I won't go through and read them all to you. I will point out some highlights though, as I was talking about the density before. For the high density residential, the densities are targeted for over 8 and up to 20 units per acre, and can be at 4 to 8 units an acre with smaller lots or of attached housing. And high-density residential uses may be located in appropriately zoned locations with mixed use and downtown classifications. They're located in places with compatible adjacent land uses where the local street system accommodates the increased traffic. And may be used as a transitional zone between medium and rural residential and other land use classifications. And this is the transitional between the medium and rural residential. I'm going to just flip back up. This would be a transition between the high-density residential and the medium-density residential. This would then become the transition piece between the high and the medium. The land use category for medium density is 3 to 4 units per acre. Just to refresh, the high-density residential was 8 to 20 units per acre. So this is dropping down to 3 to 4 units per acre, and includes the same single-family detached housing. Can also include some duplexes, some townhomes, or multifamily dwellings, as long as the housing units stay at the 3 to 4 units per acre overall. This is the permitted uses table in the packet. It's a little bit easier to understand. But basically what I've highlighted in yellow, because I know the audience can't see what's going on here, but this is the condensed permitted uses table of every use that's allowed in the R13 and R10 zoning categories. And the yellow is where there is a difference between the two. Everything else is considered the same. So there are two differences between the R10 and the R13 zoning classifications, where zoning for the solar farms are allowed as a general use permit, and zoning for agricultural production and crops are allowed as a general use permit in the R13 zoning classification. So this consistency statement that I included in your packet includes that the consistency statement with the plan for the comprehensive plan with the land use plan, and it states, as I've written it, it states that the consistency of the rezoning request, the zoning map amendment request, is reasonable and in the public interest based upon the information provided within the staff report, associated documents submitted to the Board of Commissioners, and the information provided through the public hearing. And based on those reasonings, the subject property is proposed as R13, which is designated primarily to accommodate single-family detached residential development uses at medium densities in areas served by public water and sewer. The proposed zoning is consistent with the land use plan as detailed in the comprehensive plan, and that the proposed zoning of R13 will fit in with the context of the surrounding areas. And the proposed zoning of R13 is consistent with the Code of Ordinances, and any development will require site plan approval process to ensure all site-specific development ordinances and policies are met. If you feel this is an inconsistent request, then we would change the statement to reflect the inconsistencies with the plan. As I've written it, as staff is recommending approval, and the planning board has also recommended approval, I've written the consistency statement as if it is going to be as if it's going to be approved. But I just want you to note that if we are going to deny the request, that the consistency statement will need to be changed as part of your motion. But I have written it based on the recommendations of staff and the planning board as if you're going to approve it. So just to follow up on some of the housekeeping, the application verification was verified and was completed properly. We do have signatures for the heirs of the owner of Robert Horton since he is deceased. We do have their signatures on file that they are aware of the request and have been notified. The proper notification requirements were met. The legal advertisement requirements were met. Again, the planning board has recommended approval of the case RZ 216-03. Staff is also recommending approval of the case, and the action requested tonight is that you approve the case RZ 2016-03. You have any questions for me?
questions from the board? Okay,
All right,
if not,
thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to flip it back for Joe to his presentation.
okay. All right, you've heard the recommendation of the staff and planning board, and you've heard the public hearing. What's your pleasure?
I'll move that we approve RZ 2016-03.
Second.
Motion made, second. Other comments or discussion? All in favor? And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I know this has been very contentious, and I appreciate the patience and effort of everyone involved. Okay, the next item then is street closure request by Shiloh Temple. Is somebody going to speak on street closure?
Mayor Matheny,
Yeah.
I don't see anyone here present
Okay.
for that. What I can tell you is it's the same request that we have received in previous years. And that's about all I can tell you on this.
Yeah, well, I attended that last year, so I can speak firsthand on it, and it was a very nice event, and in fact, the street was never completely closed. You could get through there, but they own property on that street, and they want to have an event down there, and they have to request that closure from NCDOT since it is a state street. So anyway, having said that, if you have questions, I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, what's your pleasure?
I make a motion that we approve the street closure at Shiloh Temple requested.
Second. Motion made and second. Any other comments or discussion? All in favor? And the motion carries. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we are down now to deciding how to proceed on the budget. Did you have something on that, Joe?
Just in summary, you've got a couple of options.
Okay.
The options that we presented is, per state statute, you can adopt a budget ordinance tonight. Second option that we provided to you is that if you don't adopt this budget ordinance, you're probably going to want some time to work together in work sessions to come up with a majority opinion on where to take the budget. And so we assumed you would need some work sessions. As I've mentioned, you already had June 22nd on your schedule. We're making a request, and this is coming from me to be transparent. I've got a conflict, but asking for the 22nd to be moved to the 21st, but also because we think you would need more time if you do adjust the budget that's been presented, that you would want to add work sessions on June 15th and June 29th. Last thing that we put in there, strictly per your purview, while it's not required, if you wanted to have another public hearing so that the community could hear the results of your work sessions, that was a possibility as well. Given the time frame that we would need for advertising, we put it on the 29th just to give enough adequate time to advertise it. So that's all we've got.
Yeah, let me make a comment on that other. I'd had a conversation with some other mayors, and what some of them do is they have two public hearings, one such as that we had tonight, which is staff's proposal, and then the other would be the final proposal from the board. My personal opinion is we're running up against the wall this year, and it'd be a little bit tight to do that. I think that it's certainly your decision as to what you want to do. All of you had indicated that you were available on the 15th, 21st, and 29th. So now I'd like to hear from you as to what you'd like to do.
Well, I think if we're going to have a work session, I think it ought to be on the 15th.
Okay. Anyone else on that? Could I suggest that we go ahead and pin down both dates, and if we don't need the 21st, then we just don't have that meeting, we pull it from the calendar. but I'd rather go ahead, I personally would rather go ahead and have it available if we need it. And I'm not talking about for a public hearing, I'm just saying if we needed it. So that's just my suggestion.
Okay, I'll review
Make that as a
15th and
motion.
21st.
Will you make that as a
Yeah,
motion?
I will.
Okay, we have a motion to hold both dates, 15th and 21st. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Other discussion? All in favor? Motion carried. Dale, were you? Okay, I'm sorry. Couldn't tell. Okay, thank you. So we have work sessions set aside for the 15th and the 21st. And if we don't need the 21st, we'll pull it from the calendar. So I appreciate everybody working on this the way you have. Board comments. Dale, I'll start with you tonight.
No, I just appreciate the work that Joe and the staff have done on the budget, and I think it shows a lot of insight and a lot of needs. So anyway, I appreciate the work that the staff and Joe have done on this thing.
I echo your statement. I appreciate the work they've all put into it.
I do too. I echo Dale's statement, and thanks everybody for being here tonight.
Okay. Joe, manager's report.
Just a couple of public service announcements. I need to also recognize Bobby for some budget transfers, and I got a request for the board to cancel a public hearing based upon some information I received this afternoon. As far as the public service announcements, the movie in the park has been rescheduled to July 1st. And then just want to recognize, let everyone know that we've got Town Hall Day down at the state legislature on Wednesday of this week, so we'll be heading down there and just making sure that they know that Zebulon has concerns, and for them to be mindful of the legislation that they pass. And before I talk about the request to cancel the public hearing, let me recognize Bobby Fitz for the budget transfers.
Okay, I'll keep this as brief as possible. Just a little cleanup for our last opportunity for this current budget year. We moved 1,500 in governing body, moved 1,500 from elections to materials and supplies. In administration, moved 250 from group insurance to cell phones, moved 2,700 from retirement, 200 of that to travel and training, 300 to print and copying, 2,000 to contract services, and 200 to insurance and bonds. Moved 1,500 from unemployment compensation to contract services in the tax collection department of contract services. In planning, moved 2,900 from part-time salaries, 1,500 of that to vehicle maintenance, 700 to computers, 600 to print and copying, and 100 to miscellaneous. In buildings and grounds, moved 2,000 from professional service to buildings and grounds maintenance, moved 1,000 from janitorial materials and supplies to vehicle maintenance, and moved 1,000 from fuel to contract services. In police department, moved 2,000 from fuel expense, 1,200 of that to travel and training, 500 to equipment maintenance, and 300 to K-9 unit. In fire, moved 4,000 from salaries to part-time salaries, moved 5,000 from salaries to vehicle maintenance, moved 5,000 from group insurance to insurance and bonds, moved 400 from salaries to inspections, moved 700 from electricity and water to equipment maintenance, moved 700 from fuel to equipment maintenance, moved 1,200 from fuel to vehicle maintenance, recurring theme. Moved 1,200 from defibrillator, 800 of that to vehicle maintenance, and 400 to contract services. In streets, moved 100 from fuel to miscellaneous. In sanitation, moved 300 from travel and training to print and copying. In parks and recreation, moved 1,000 from part-time salaries in farmers market to farmers market. Moved 3,500 from fuel, 3,000 of that to grounds maintenance, and 500 to print and copying. Moved 4,500 from contract services, 4,000 of that to equipment maintenance, and 500 to cell phones. And then finally, in special appropriations, moved 1,300 to employee appreciation, 1,000 of that from unemployment compensation, and the remaining 300 from the Campo dues. That's it.
Been busy.
Vehicle
Thank you, Bob. You have anything else, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
On May 10th, the board adopted Resolution 2016-12 requesting a public hearing for June 13th. That was at the request of staff. We had looked to get you some information on a text amendment. We're not prepared for that, so we're asking the board to cancel the public hearing that was scheduled for June 13th.
Okay. That it?
Yes, sir.
Let me, before we adjourn, echo Town Hall Day, how important it is. I think there's, right now, somewhere between 450, 500 people signed up to come, and some will sign up that day. So it's an opportunity to show the state legislature the importance of municipal government and maybe get them to slack off a little bit on some of us, because as you saw in the budget, how we got hit with a lot of what the state legislature did, and Joe didn't even cover all of it. So anyway, it's extremely important, and I look forward to a really good day up there. So, having said that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, we need an action on that, canceling the
Oh, we
public
do?
hearing.
Okay, okay. Well, is there a motion to pull the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Okay. Anything else that I've overlooked? Okay. Now, is there a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
And second? We're adjourned.